What's up, guys? It's Damp. I'm gonna throw something a little different on today, as we're gonna be playing World of Tanks and kind of walking you through, um, just in general, some of the features and benefits of certain tanks that are in the game. I'm gonna break it down by country. Originally, I wanted to do all of them at once. But kind of what I'm going to do is break them down individually by country. This is information I wish I had it when I first started playing the game. I've kind of gone back to it after a long layoff, and I'll be the first one to tell you, if you look up my Watt Lab stats, I'm not great at the game. So don't go in there thinking that you're going to see somebody that's like extremely pro. That's definitely not it. This is just a series of videos for information of what I wish I knew before I started playing the game, and something I thought would help you all. So we're going to start today by talking about the Americans, which is the line that I primarily have played, probably more than other countries, the American heavy line. So we're going to talk just in general about, before you make a decision, like if you've started the game, and you're kind of looking for a country to pick of how it suits your playstyle. That's what this video series is about. I wanted to make something that would allow you guys to pick something that would benefit your style and your personality when you're playing games. So the Americans, generally speaking, the American tanks are like the all-around Mario type class. They don't excel at any one thing, and they aren't terrible at any one thing. Generally speaking, American tanks play hull down because their hulls are really, really weak. So to give you an idea, this area, this is a T-29, which is a tier 7. This area on the American tanks is typically their weak spot. Both sides, and obviously the rear. The front armor is typically pretty well sloped for a lot of the American tanks. Now, there are some that are pretty squared off. You can see some of these, like in the earlier tiers, have a lot of weak spots. But if you look down through the line, they're fairly well sloped outside of really the T1. The M6 is a little squared off, but primarily they're pretty well sloped. So what that means is they can lead to a lot of ricochets if you angle your tank fairly well, which we'll go over in another video series, and we'll talk a little bit more about hold down later on. But generally speaking, they're average. They don't excel at anything. They don't suck at anything. So this could be a good line to start with if you're just starting off, in my opinion. So as we look at kind of what they're good at and what they're not so good at, we'll look at it. Let's start with the light tanks. So if we look at the light tanks, you're going to see here, you start off obviously with the T1. Then you go into, really it breaks into two tiers. I think this is pronounced the Chaffee here. This line is really fast. You can see the top speed of 77. Comparison to the M7 line, the top speed is 60, but that 77 would carry all the way down, really as really the fastest tank that is in the American line. This tank is really, really good at that tier. Often you'll see him just zooming around the map, scouting. Nobody has a prayer of hitting him because of how fast they are. So as long as they stay out of getting tracked or out of the open with combat, and they're running around just trying to scout, they're primarily really, really good tanks. Unfortunately, the American tanks in general, if you're light, you're pretty easy to hit because they're bigger than a lot of the other tanks that are in the light tree. They do have pretty good fire rates when you look down through them. They're pretty good as far as how fast they reload on average, and their view range is really good, which is important with a light tank. So that's kind of the lights and how they break down. So if we move to the mediums, same thing. They're fairly versatile. They're not necessarily great at anything, or they don't suck at anything. Again, they have good view ranges. Another thing they have is gun depression on the mediums that's pretty good. So if we kind of look at one of these guys just to show you, what it means by gun depression is they can get their guns down. So if you're coming up over a hill, your gun and your turret can actually, that's probably a bad example, the turret can go down on a pretty good angle, which allows you to really make it easier on the hills, the maps that have hills. It doesn't come into play on every single map, but it is an advantage on the maps that are hills. Whereas conversely, the Chinese are really, really bad at that. Their tanks do not perform well with gun depression. Again, same thing with the mediums. Keep your hull down. Their guns, as far as their firepower, I would consider average. They're not great. They're not terrible. So Anyway, that's the mediums. So if we go into heavies, which are the ones that I really have the most experience with in the American heavies, same kind of concept. Good turret armor. So if you look at their turrets on, say, the T-29, 279 on the front armor, that's really good. In comparison to some of the other countries you look at, that's really their biggest advantage in the American line, is this front turret armor is really good. When it comes to their hull armor, like we already discussed, it's weak. Also, their ammo racks tend to be pretty well exposed in some of these that are easy to hit. So that can they aren't susceptible to fire like some of the Germans and Russians are, but they do take a lot of damage to the sides and the rear. Again, their gun depression is above average. It's pretty good. But I will tell you the one caveat, and almost the reason I quit the game, was this tank right here. So the Lee, if we look at the Lee, you guys can see there's no independent turret here. So you have to actually turn the vehicle. The turret doesn't turn independently. I have a really high win ratio with this tank. It's like 65%, and I don't know how in the fuck I was able to do it, because this tank made me want to kill myself as I was trying to get to the heavy line. It's a really slow grind with the Lee, and it was the reason I really didn't end up wanting to pursue going to the American heavy line, because of this tank. Because the turret doesn't move independently, it makes it really, really difficult to play, in my opinion. Now, there may be a lot of people who say, oh, you know, all you have to do is this or that, but I was so young or inexperienced at the game at that point that I didn't know how to play it. So it's a miracle that my win rate is as good as it is in that tank, but I would tell you this is going to be a frustrating time. So it might be something, if you're newer, you may want to avoid the American heavy tanks and move to the Russians. That's just my opinion. If you are a patient person, in my opinion, you can excel at the American line. If you're not, you probably want to consider moving to the German or the Russian. I think those are a little better of a starter line, so to speak. So moving on. That's it for the heavies. So moving on to the tank destroyers. So again, tank destroyers are pretty versatile. I don't have a lot of these in the American line, as you can see, but most of the people I play with play this line. And I will tell you the Hellcat is probably one of the best as a tank destroyer, in my opinion, in that tier between 5 and 7. The Hellcat is just incredible for what it can do. Again, the view range tends to be above average. In the later tiers, there's two lines where you get bigger guns as you go in through here. And then down here, or I'm sorry, I did that backwards. Down here, you tend to have higher damage per minute. Up here, you tend to have more mobility. So you can see top speed 13, top speed 35. So those are the two different tiers of tank destroyers. If you want to know the difference, it's either you take bigger guns or you take more speed, allowing you to flank a little bit more. So that's kind of how they break down. The tier that's obviously higher speed, you're going to have a lot less armor on it, a lot less armor. But you get a bigger gun on the lower tier here, or the bottom tier here. So that's kind of a breakdown of the tank destroyer. Now if we go into artillery and SPGs, so these guys, the advantage to them is that they really don't have to move much to cover a long distance. However, they have really long aim times, but they get the biggest guns in the game. This is actually the biggest gun in the game right here. Currently, I mean, this may have changed, or may change moving forward, but currently this is one of the biggest guns in the game. I think it's a 240 millimeter, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 240 millimeter howitzer. So as you look through at the American SPG line, if that's something you want to do, be prepared to be frustrated. I don't think they're very accurate in comparison to some of the others, and the longer aim time makes it even more frustrating. It's kind of got longer reload time as well. So if you really want to have fun with an arty, in my opinion, you play something maybe like the French that tend to be able to have faster reload times, and they may not hit for as much, but it makes it a little more fun because you can take more shots during a game. Just my opinion. So that's kind of a breakdown of the American line, guys. So just again to reiterate, they're not great at anything. They tend to be above average at many of the things that are important in that particular tank's role. I would consider them as starting off kind of a medium difficulty. But once you get to the American heavies, I think those are some of the most fun to play if you're a patient person. You can kind of get hauled down and hide your armor and really take a lot of shots and take a lot of damage and still be able to move forward and help your tank win. or help your team win with those heavier tanks. So overall, that's pretty much it for the Americans. I'll be moving through some of the rest of these countries, and then I'll do one video in general that kind of recaps all of it. So thanks for watching. See you.